Okay, welcome everyone. We are here for hopefully maximizing your live engagement. Really glad that you can be here. Before we kick off, as we should, I just want to acknowledge that we do have a few people right across the country. So why don't I just say hi and just acknowledge that I'm hanging out in Western Sydney on Darug country. I want to pay respects to our friends past, present and emerging, and I hope wherever you are coming across in Australia and potentially beyond, I hope you're having a fantastic time and we are going to have a great time. My name is Ben Newsom. I'm a co-founder of Virtual Excursions Australia and the founder of Physics Education, and we do a lot of virtual events. Now you can see spotlighted as well is my friend Karen.
Hello everyone, my name is Karen Player from Virtual Excursions Australia, and Ben and I are really excited to be here today to run through sort of our 101 of online engagement. So for those of you that have been with us for the previous sessions, this is our third session for Small Business Month, and we really are trying to help support people to think about how they can do online engagement. So we've had 2 different lunch talks, a lot about talking about your audience and thinking about what that audience is a great place to start to not only think about your marketing for events, but also what kind of event that you might to run. So as we go forward, we'll have a bit of a chat about that as well. And we'll be able to get you guys in the Q&A or the chat to let us know what kinds of things you're looking at. So we can actually direct a little bit about what we'll be talking about today. But our basics, I'll let you know, that we'll be covering is thinking about the equipment, the setup as well that you'll be using. So lighting, sound, your backgrounds. You can see that Ben's outside at the moment. He's got a blur. I've got the background in my office, but how you can actually use those backgrounds to help support your programs, what kind of platform, digital platform that you might want to deliver your programs on. And again, that's really linked to knowing your audience as well. And then we'll talk about some of the tips and tricks that Ben and I have used over the years about using maybe multi-cameras, using props and different things in the room as well. And also thinking about moderation, back channel chats and those kinds of things. And it might sound really overwhelming to start with, but hopefully by the end of the session today, you'll have a much better understanding about how to really maximize your online engagement. And just before I throw back to Ben, again, want to just thank the New South Wales Small Business Month for being able to supporting this program so we can put it on for free for all of you. So welcome, and I'll pass you back to Ben.
Awesome. Now, just let you a bit of a heads up. I'm a link dropper. Karen knows this. So as things come up, as you ask questions and whatnot, I am going to throw a lot of links at you. Some of these things may be literally the equipment that I actually use through to various pieces of software, kind of like early adopting stuff. So sometimes I find some random stuff, let's just give it a go. But here's the thing. This is best done as much as you're stuck in a webinar. Yeah, I can't see or hear. We want to make it reasonably interactive. So before we really kick off, one of the things you got to kind of know is who on earth are you talking to? Who is your audience? Now, Karen and I traditionally teach mainly to school children, but not always. But you're coming from a variety of different backgrounds. So I'm just curious. Karen's actually prepared a very simple poll. We're not going to be death by polls, by the way. But we just want a bit of an idea of where you're kind of coming from, and it gives us a bit of a heads up. And I am watching the chat too, which, because by the way, it's housekeeping. We're being nice and trusting today. We're all adults, and so we can trust all the URLs. Just let's be nice within in the chat, and we're all good. But if you never actually do, and I'll get into the protection stuff later, if you're never quite sure, you can always lock that down in your own webinars. But for now, I'd love to know a little bit about you through a poll. So Karen, if you could launch it up, please, if we can. So just let you know with polls, just because we're using Zoom webinar, and I know a lot of you might be using Teams or Meet or whatever, there's like 100 different platforms. Not everyone will always be able to see the polls. And it's this kind of thing that people discovered very rapidly. If they've got it on, if they're accessing it through their app, through the actual dedicated app, doesn't have, in this case it's Zoom, usually the apps have all the tools that you need. But if someone's accessing your particular session through a browser, not always going to be there. Now, right now, I'm just sort of talking at you, but not really helping if you can't see the poll. So I'm going to say, so right now, in terms of online experience, we've got people saying, yeah, we're pretty confident. There's 3 out of 4 people have gone for that, and one saying very confident. I've got a funny feeling I know who that is. Very, very good. 57% have participated, and I get it. Not everyone wants to type it. These are completely anonymous. We won't throw it at you too much, but what's that? You can see the sharing of the results coming up here. So at least you get a bit of an idea of what where people are sort of coming from. And this is good. So if you're confident or very confident, feel free for us to really get into the deeper area of conferencing. Great. Awesome. Okay, so that's excellent. And just an idea, there's another poll there, Karen. I'd kind of be curious to sort of know about. Another question, sort of in terms of how much we've been doing online programs. I'm very curious to see how much you've been doing on that. So we'll drop that off. There it is. So you'll see now how confident are with your camera technology in camera. Are you happy being in front of a camera in the first place? Are you happy pressing the buttons to make the buttons do the things that they should actually do? Or please don't put me in front of camera ever. Please don't make me press buttons and make a break. I totally understand.
And this is a really good example of making sure you plan ahead. So I think what we've happened here is one of our polls has actually got mixed. And so this is how many sessions have you delivered, but it actually is saying in the question, how confident are you with the technology on camera? So sometimes Ben and I don't usually do polls in our training sessions, and we just came into it, thought, let's do a couple of polls, because it can be a really engaging way to actually find out about your audience at the beginning of your session. We actually will do the original poll at the end as well about whether you're feeling more confident. But considering most of you were very confident to start with, we don't have to worry. But this one was, how many sessions have you actually run? So we've got a few people with a few and too many to count. So, but it's really good that we don't have anyone here that's not got any experience, because it really does mean that we're going from a sort of a slightly higher base. So that means hopefully lots of questions from you guys in the Q&A and the chat when we start getting into the nitty-gritty of technology. I'll just end the poll here as well.
Awesome. All right, so we want to make sure we get through this rapidly and get lots of stuff down as we go along. So first thing off the agenda from my end, at least what I can see from our run sheet, because we have a run sheet, as we should actually do when we're presenting a thing. I'm on lighting. Now, currently I'm outside and I'm not running in my traditional distance learning room. Bit of background, we've been working with this learning since, 2010 or 11 or something. And I can't count. I've got no idea how many sessions we've run, and hundreds of thousands of students, if not closer to 1 million, I suspect, over that time. I'm outside because my family has COVID. Hey, don't we all at some point? But so what that means is I've been isolated. I actually don't have it, but I'm the most isolated in my home. I'm outside in amongst the natural lighting, which is, it's sort of okay. But I thought, you know what, I could actually throw a light on a little bit, but you'll notice instantly that there's a little bit of shadowing coming across one side of my face. Traditionally, if you're in a studio environment, you would have a light directly in front of you, a light 45 degrees off to you, and another one directly off your shoulder. So one there, one there, one there. Now, it doesn't have to be elaborate. I mean, in this case, I'm outside. So I mean, like I could literally turn it off and it's not too bad. But what am I actually using? Honestly, a desk lamp. And I'm going to turn off my blur deliberately. I'm going to blur because I'm outside, because as soon as I do that, you'll see that I'm actually outside, and there's my barbecue just there. I'm literally outside. Look at this. There is nothing fancy about a desk lamp. It costs you $15 from Kmart. And you can see I've got a hair tie and baking paper. Yes, you can spend far more money, but I thought, you know what, let's actually go to the absolute simplistic way that can fix your lighting. What it does, it diffuses your light really nicely. If you have a hard source of light, like some of those LEDs, especially if they're a single source, really put hard lighting onto you and then shadowing around the place. So if I just put this just up to the side of my laptop, throw it on, and then put my blur back on, done. Like it sort of works. But for simplicity, lighting, front, 45 degrees, and sort of like an arc, then one off your shoulder. And that's actually, they call it 3-point lighting. And it's very, very, very simple to do. Of course, I can start sending you some links. Yeah, I could. Heikki Hustler, yeah, cheap lighting options, $15 and baking paper. Literally works. Now, I'm just going to turn it off for now because at least, we're talking best practice, but for now, I don't need it in my eyes. But that's actually something to be aware of. Now, the lighting can get over the top. I am actually aware that if you have, like there are museums, and we work with a lot of different museums around the place. Some museums will have a whole variety of lighting going right away around us and whatnot. But the reality is business people, we're trying to present often from our offices or in some cases from our bedrooms. It doesn't have to be fancy. Now, sound. So lighting's one thing, but you know what? Sound by far is a killer. Absolute killer. Like, how many times have you sat through a session and you can't hear them, they're breaking up, or there's a whole bunch of background noise, so you still can't hear them anyway? That's an issue. Now, you'll notice I'm actually wearing these headphones, not just for my hearing, but so that it's actually so the microphone's closer to my mouth, because honestly, about 30 meters away is the M7. So I've got a whole bunch of cars running along behind me. Now, here's the thing. I actually did a quick check with Karen to see if the sound was okay. We're not always going to be in a situation where you can have a microphone close to your mouth and be able to produce a decent sound. So I'm going to throw you a couple of different ideas. One is a free thing. It's called Crisp. It's AI. So if you like your artificial intelligence, this is a useful link. So you guys look in the chat, click on that link, grab it. What it does is it kind of smooths out your audio and also starts to learn how you sound, which is kind of scary when you think about it. And it starts to remove background noise. Now, I did a quick test about half an hour ago prior because I hadn't run it on this computer. I hadn't made it learn off my voice too much yet. And I was going, oh, I might just drop it for now. But I do know some people who are getting a great result with that. However, you may not want to put that on your computer. I get that. So what do you do if you are, for example, a fitness coach and you're needing to present a live class, whatever class it might be, and you can't be hooked up literally to your computer? Now, yes, you can use Bluetooth headphones. Definitely, you totally can do that, and you're unwired. Problem though, and a few people have discovered this over the time, is if you have those Bluetooth headphone things in your ears, every now and then they unpair, which is not great. Or what if they're paired, and despite it saying there's the battery's happy days, they're going to work, then they go off on you, and you're merrily doing your session, and no one can hear you, and suddenly you get this big feed on the side in the chat, where whatever platform you're using, saying we can't hear you. Be careful of that. Now, there is actually a really handy, and I'm actually pretty agnostic when it comes to different bits of hardware, but for now, I will share with you a current favorite. Some of you might know Rode, the company Rode. It's an Australian company. The wireless Go mics are really, really handy. Now, I would love to have brought this out today, but we're literally using it in a session right now. It started 15 minutes ago with some homeschoolers right across the country. The wireless Goes are very, very, very handy. And it's not just for conferencing. They have a 30-meter range where crystal clear audio quality comes from you to the receiver. And that receiver you simply plug into your iPad or your computer, and it's great. It's even better if it's combined with a lapel mic, and suddenly your sound is perfect. Now, that's just there is a way to go. Now, in your rooms, now I'm just going to grab my my camera here, and you'll notice something here. It's a secondary camera. I'll go with that. There we go. You'll see. Yeah, the little eyeballs on it. Our presenters put these on our ones. These microphones, these Logitech cameras, have a pretty good microphone anyway. Now, if you're presenting very close when you're on a laptop, the microphones on your laptops aren't that bad, but I tend to find that the inbuilt microphones on dedicated ones like this tend to be just a little bit better. I'm going to throw a Logitech link at you soon enough. But I guess the moral of the story is think about what they can hear before about what they can see. People will handle the lighting being a bit dodgy, but if they can't hear you, it ain't going to work so well. So that was a really brief chat about lighting and sound. Now, I know, Karen, you've been listening happily in the background. Is there anything you'd like to add to that? Oh, we've got some Q&As coming up as I go to Karen.
Yeah, I was just about to throw those ones at you. So Craig was wondering, can multiple presenters be on the road go at the same time?
Oh, I like that. Okay, so I actually do know of a splitter. That is definitely the case. I know who Craig is. There are splitters for sure. They could feed them in. You're getting a little bit fancy on that, but yes, you can do that. I mean, let's be honest, you want a channel, right? One thing to be aware is noise coming over the top of noise. So imagine that you are presenting to two different spots. You want to make sure that you're not going to get a weird switching if you're running with two different cameras. But if you're on the single camera, happy days. That'll work quite fine. Cool. Now we had another Q&A.
Yes. So Mary was wondering about microphones for walking and outdoors. We did actually, I'll put a link in about a whole outdoor training as well, but I'll leave you to answer that question, Ben.
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. So walking outdoors. So right now I'm undercover and I've got a traditional, like literally headphone jack thing. I'm out of the wind. Sound is not good in wind. I mean, think about like when you're watching a weather person present in the weather, they're doing the thing on the beach and it's scratchy sometimes. And that's when they've got full blown, cyclonic winds or something. The reason why it's not too bad is that they've got a fluffy thing on it. Now, a fluffy thing for sound engineers, they call it a dead cat. Sorry, it's what they call it. But think of it as something that's just fluffy and gets rid of that harsh sound of wind coming across. So a lot of these microphones will come with a soft covering. Definitely use it. And if it doesn't come with it, you can either make your own with something fluffy or just add it as an extra thing for sure. It's definitely very handy to have. Sound really causes dramas. It can do. Just be aware of if you are running with something that says 30-meter range, that's assuming your battery's at 100%. So maybe do it at 20 meters or 10 meters away. Now, of course, though, you have to question, why are you presenting from 30 meters away from a camera? You're going to need to zoom in, right? Otherwise, all you're doing is filling this huge space with everything but what you're talking about, unless you're trying to show the space. So just being aware of that it's kind of handy. So lighting and sound, yes, but later on, Karen, I'll talk about framing too. Anything else that might have grabbed your attention there, Karen?
Yes, so Heikki was asking about the Logitech. Can you record from two angles and switch? Or how are you using it when you're using multi-cameras? And we will talk about multi-cameras a bit more later as well, but that's something if you're using extra software that Ben might mention.
Yeah, sure. All right. So you're all stuck in webinar, so you can't really have a quick play. If we're in a meeting, I could get you to have a little play if you have a second camera right now. So recording side, if you're recording on this platform, it'll record whatever's being shown. So if I go down to the bottom left of my screen, there's a little chevron, little arrow pointing up. I can click on my video here just now and briefly go to that camera, which I'm now holding in front of me. And sorry, you're going to get close up view. Going to happen. All right. So if I go like this, now it's boom. Whoa, close up, close up view. Told you. At least I warned you, right? And I'll come back. Now that would have recorded. Now, if you're getting a bit fancier, there are platforms, and I'm going to flick some links at you now, just while I go find it, that will record separate streams, which is kind of handy. I believe that XSplit does a pretty good job off the top of my head. There we go. That's why I'm literally just jumped out of this. I'm running off one computer today. There we go. That is like a video mixing software. You kind of need a more punchier computer with a bit more processing power because it's kind of recording both videos, right? If you make it do that. So it's a lot of effort for the processor. But generally, to answer your question for now without going into too much, if you're recording the screen and you're just switching the screens, it works quite well. Just Karen.
Thanks, Ben. And just, to add a few things to Ben regarding sort of cheap and cheerful ways to help with lighting. I've got these ones here. I'll try not to blind anyone. They're very, very bright. So I will position them away from me. You can see I've now got shadow on the opposite side of my face. These can be really useful depending on what's happening with my my room where I've got open windows and curtains. So by positioning these just out of sight, so I don't get blinded by looking at them, I can move them around. They're battery operated, not too expensive. So you can, I've had a desk lamp running in from a PowerPoint in the other room just to give light. Ben and I can both attest. We do a lot of North American sessions at ridiculous dark hours of the morning. You really can, get away with that little bit of extra light, so that it makes you look a little bit more awake as well. So there are definitely a few ways to think about your lighting. Quite a lot of places will now have a lot of those small ring lights that you can get to sit behind your camera. I know Kmart's got quite cheap setups at the moment that are not going to last forever, but certainly can just maybe help if you've got some problems with your lighting.
And what you can also do too, I was just going to play around in the, again, I went to video right now. So I've gone into, click on video. I'll actually do it again, so I actually can follow exactly. So the little arrow, because a lot of you are using Zoom, on the arrow, it says video settings. So I click on it. And now I go, adjust for low light. Instantly changes, yeah? Now that's at auto. Now I can start playing with manual and start literally sliding a thing back and forth. And I can kind of find a happy medium. I mean, honestly, auto works. Touch up appearance, it's kind of like a digital Vaseline for the camera. Suddenly it's a slightly better. Some of you might disagree, but it's a way it's inbuilt. Now, thankfully, a lot of the other platforms are catching up with what Zoom's been doing. Zoom bolted out of the gate back in 2012, and honestly, no one's really catching up completely. Yeah, it's got other things that people might argue about, but for now, from a user point of view, it's very, very handy. So yes, you can, your actual settings within it actually work a treat, and then of course you can then play with the getting rid of blur and whatnot.
And one of the things we'll probably repeat many, many times is to practice, to actually sit down with whichever platform you're using, whichever camera you're using, and learn your settings. Learn how to, as Ben said, adjust for low lighting, whether or not you want to have it on auto, doing the touch up, those kinds of things can be really useful. And testing your camera. So this little Logitech camera here was a great one that I used sitting on my main computer. Now, Ben can attest to this. I have had absolute dramas with my camera off my sort of main computer that I use. So this is the situation I use when I'm doing any presenting. But when I'm just having a meeting, I'll usually sit at my desktop, and I have not been able to have camera. And it turns out that Microsoft has done an update, and the drivers for my Logitech camera are not working, are not compatible. And I've not been able to use my additional camera. So those kinds of things, beware. So you may have done 10 sessions in a row with your existing setup and everything has worked perfectly smoothly. And then you think, oh, I don't need to test anything. I'll just turn it on 2 minutes before, and then nothing works. So beware of your computer doing updates. Beware of Zoom or whatever digital platform you're using doing updates as well. Even for people that have done it a lot, it catches us all the time. Now, just on cameras as well, this links to a little bit when we're talking about engagement. But when I first started out, a couple of years ago, when we were all learning delivering programs from home, I invested in a camera that has presets. So I get this really handy little remote control. So whilst I'm talking, I can zoom in and out fairly easily, but I can preset things that I want to show you. So I brought a little friend in today just to demonstrate. And this is something that we'll talk about when we're discussing how you can do different engaging things. So this is my pet green tree frog, and because a lot of the programs I do are education programs, I'm talking about live animals or props, so I will use a lot of things in my room to zoom into, whether it's a rock or a fossil or frog, other things in my room that we will look at as well. So it does link a little bit to different backgrounds. So Ben, as he said, he's outside, he's got his blur on, so you don't necessarily know that it's outside. Now, I've done some quite professional webinars and the things that I've noticed in people's background. Now, admittedly, I am looking. You know, there was a museum that was doing some sessions and it was in the office of the PA that has to do lots of functions and things, but there were cases of wine behind them in the background. Now, it's not necessarily a problem. Certainly it was an adult program, but it just doesn't necessarily look as professional. So it is definitely worthwhile thinking about what's behind you. And the fact that I think pretty much all of the different digital platforms now have a blur is very handy. So if you haven't been using it, either really think about what's behind you or pop in that blur. Another option is to change your background as well. So again, that little chevron next to your camera Ben was talking about is your friend. Know all your different cameras that are in there, but you can also choose a virtual background. So I can click simply to my blur. Oh, now it's not going to let me do my blur. There we go. But I can also put a logo behind me. Now, this one is just a picture. Because I don't have a lot of depth behind me, it's relatively simple to do. But if I move around too much or my hands, I can sort of disappear. So you do need to be relatively still using it. But you can use video. We do think it takes up a lot of bandwidth. So we tend not to recommend that, but I have certainly seen some that are very just slow background. I've also seen people that have used their PowerPoint presentation as their background, and they can sort of talk to it and those kinds of things. So yeah, backgrounds can be really useful. I'll let Ben go into in a moment a whole thing with sort of OBS and vision switching that you can have yourself in front of an overlay as you're presenting and those kinds of things. But what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change my background while I hand over to Ben, and we'll just have a little bit of a look about how we can use that as part of our engagement, but also as it's kind of like your set dressing as well.
Absolutely. Now, I just noticed in the questions before I sort of move on, Mary, yeah, are those lights used for outdoors? I'd say yes, definitely so. But mind you, you've got to mount the lights, right? Especially if you're by yourself. So I thought I might just quickly share a thing I sort of had hanging here that I was going to share a little bit later, but that's okay. There's a thing called Padcaster. A lot of people here might present using an iPad. Padcaster is effectively a frame that sits on a tripod for your iPad. But on that frame, you can strap stuff to it. So you can put your fancy microphone on it. You can put your nice lighting on it and whatnot. And you can wheel the thing around. I mean, you can even, if you really want to get crazy fancy, it has like a little teleprompter thing, literally like a newsreader. So if you feel that you can't deliver your lines, you can see these lines being written and you can just speak to it, which is right in front of the camera, which is kind of neat. So having a look at Padcaster, it is very fancy, very absolutely, but it does work quite well. Now, I thought I might, seeing we sort of just briefly touched on the camera thing, you'll see there was a link that I put in there for a camera called the Ava Cam 520. Now, Ava is very well not known in Australia. It's well known, especially in the US school system. And actually, I do actually know that one of the people, I will acknowledge actually, I haven't actually acknowledged him yet. Oh no, he hasn't made it. Oh, some of the knowledge that I've got from here was actually from a Churchill Fellowship going over to the US to find out a lot about how the US school system, the US museums, zoos, aquariums and more were doing video conferencing back in 2014. But looks like Peter wasn't able to make it. No, that's okay. Well, I've acknowledged him and I was very, very happy with that. Anyway, so the Ava is very, very handy. So if you look in the chat, you'll see there's a link that takes you just to one of the resellers. What it does have in it, which is kind of neat, is it has embedded low light capability. So I'm not in my video conference room. I would love to have been presented today in that today, but it's not going to happen today. But imagine me flicking the lights off. Amazingly, it really does ambient light incredibly well. In fact, it also tracks your face as you move, and it keeps that focus the whole time. Really, really, really neat. Now, having the right lighting and the right, all that stuff is fine, but what if you literally aren't setting up stuff properly? So I want to quickly flick to another camera. Yeah, I've got a lot of cameras. And actually, you know what I will do is, just because I'm just making stuff up, I'm going to go to here and you'll see my barbecue, especially when I drop, yeah, I'm off to one side. I'm now going to drop and show you, yes, there is there is no, it's not the greatest way. I want to quickly go over here and show you this thing over here. There's a bit blurry. I'm gonna have to drop my blur, I believe, to be able to help us out. So I'll go over here, go away. All right, so yeah, I am outside. Now I'm a science educator, so yes, I've got a retort stand. Yes, and there's stuff all behind here. I'm just hanging this off here, but I've seen a lot of people just hang their cameras off anything to face downwards. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my view to that camera. So you're now going to be looking straight down. There you go. Now, if I had my, there's my plate. There's my table, not looking pretty. If I make it nice, I would make it, prettier. I could have like a fabric or something here. If I had a plate here, notice how shiny it is. Shiny means potentially not great, depending on what you're trying to show. Now, you can hear the bird calls. Yes, it is nice out here. Now, I want to show you an issue that comes up, and I do this a lot when I do training. I've got some flour. It's white. It's now on a white plate. Can you see my flour, my white flour on my white plate? Not great, is it? A lot of people make the mistake of wanting to show a thing, but right now I can see it's slightly blurry too. It's not ideal because it should actually autofocus. But this is not great because you're trying to show a thing. Wouldn't it have been smarter to have this on a blue plate? If I had it on the blue plate, you'd have contrast. Contrast matters, and it's really clear when I suddenly grab something different. So contrast in color, contrast in shape makes a huge difference when you're presenting. Absolutely so. And I'm just going to come back to my face again. There we go. And put my blur on because I should be professional and be not showing my barbecue. But hey, we're just showing you, literally behind the background. So that is a quick thing to be aware of. Now, coming back to Karen, what do you got to show?
Thanks, Ben. And that idea of contrast is really important because it can be really tricky showing things depending on, I tend to use a tan tablecloth and I've got a lot of fossils that are brown. So, sometimes I put a piece of white paper underneath them to create that contrast. Sometimes I'm actually picking things up and kind of pointing them at the camera because it changes the dynamic of the presentation as well. So it can be really useful. So within those few moments that Ben was talking, I've just changed what's behind me. So again, a lot of the programs that I deliver as my small business is environmental and earth science. So I've got a bit of a volcano behind me. Now, I haven't set this as a preset, so we'll see how we go. But as I'm, focusing on what's in the background, it's good to use it. So sometimes you might want to have a pot plant or something that is just a nice visual. Sometimes a really plain background for no distraction is also useful, but engaging with some of the things that are behind there can be great as well. It changes the profile. I'm going to move my head out of the way at the same time. So if I had this set up as a preset, it would be seamless. And then I would be able to point out the different features of inside the volcano and talk about the layers. So you can see that by using this prop, I can point to it. It's nice and simple way to engage by using something that's just behind me here. So I often will use things that's on my wall. And while we're sort of talking about the background, I'm going to go behind the veil and sort of reveal what's behind the smoke and mirrors. So as I mentioned, I'm usually sitting over there. So if I zoom out a little bit and continue to zoom out, you can see what's actually sitting behind me. But where I usually sit, hopefully it's not too messy, it's my computer over there, my printer, all of my paperwork, all of my office things. So it's a relatively small room with quite a lot of windows, so it can either be way too bright, so I've got to close the curtains, or not bright enough that I've got to use those additional bits of lighting. But I can control my space really well. So essentially my door is just to the other side here, and I'm almost in a corridor. You can't really get in the office while I'm here. I've got to cheap Bunnings table that I can fold up and put behind a bookshelf. So when I'm presenting, I can have things in front of me and then I can put it away and use my office again. So thinking about your space and how to control that is really important. And I know that we've got a few people today that are doing either outdoor spaces or exercise. I think we've got Tai Chi and Pilates. So you don't want to have a little space. You want to have a big space. So it's important then to think about the frame and whether you're in your frame all the time or whether you go out of frame. It can be quite difficult to see if you don't have a big display. We certainly, before I was doing this from home, I was a walker. I would always present standing up and I would walk around and interact with the things in the space, but I would put markers on the floor. So don't be afraid to actually give yourself some boundaries to make sure that you are engaging continually with your audience by not leaving the frame. I even was doing it then when I'm pointing with my arms out. You can't see where my fingers are anymore. So sometimes you've got to put yourself back in frame again. So there's lots of these kinds of things that you can do. Sometimes your camera may be too high or too low. So, you know, I've seen people putting boxes or things underneath, or actually creating angles so they can get a steeper angle on their camera. All of those kinds of things, even as Ben was showing, using a retort stand to hang your camera upside down. Your audience doesn't see any of those. Now, we are revealing our secrets here today because that's what the training is all about. So, you know, we are giving you some of those secrets, but usually your audience won't see any of those things unless you allow them to. So, yeah, definitely be thinking about how you can, you know, create spaces, either intimate spaces, if that's what you're doing. You know, as I said, all I've done is turned myself around sideways in the room. Or you can create a big space if you're doing something outside or that you need a lot of movement and space. So yeah, again, always going back to audiences and practicing to actually either record, go out and do a session that you're recording that you can look back, or you know, or have someone that's a family member or a friend doing a practice with you, so they can give you feedback. Oh, actually, that spot under that tree at this time of day, the lighting's not great. I can see that I've.
Yeah. Well, I was actually just thinking just then, Karen, you've got this beautiful window to the left-hand side of you, streaming in sunlight, but that also brings in an issue. So what I'm thinking about doing, whilst I show another little thing, is what if, while I bang on for a little bit, is what if, I'll do the whole thing. I'll remove your spotlight, so I'm the only one there. And what if you flip your camera off to that side and set it up with the light right behind the back of your head, and we'll see the effect of that. And so whilst you sort that out, I thought I might show you another way, because Mary briefly asked about having more than one camera in your room. You know what? I bet you do. All of you do. You've all got a phone. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly share, like literally use this to do my phone instead. So on Zoom, and it's going to be different depending on the apps and things that you use, the Zoom's kind of handy. So if I go click share screen, it has this thing where I can kind of choose iPhone/iPad. Now, a little bit of a heads up, you need to have downloaded a little piece of software from Zoom into Zoom. We would have thought, but that's what they make you do. If I click on iPhone, it then starts to do it. It goes, now I've actually got it here. It says, on your phone, connect to my Wi-Fi network. Yeah, I better do that, right? Now, I then swipe on my phone from top right, because I'm using an iPhone. And I click on screen mirroring. Sure, I will do that. Then I'll click on Zoom, because that's the device it's trying to do. So it then finds it. And you know, I'm talking a way through. I'm not doing it the fast way. We're doing the slow way, so you can kind of see what's going on. Guess what? Now you're seeing my screen. So if I click this out and go out, why would I bother? Because now if I go to the camera app, I can now show my garden and the mess behind me. Yeah, the tomatoes aren't quite good. But there you go. So yeah, there's my kids trampoline. You get the idea. And I can flick it around to me if I needed to. And now I'm doing this as well. So why would this be handy? Well, imagine this. What if I needed to show an app on my screen? I mean, I've got heaps of apps in all sorts of ways. I mean, what if I was going into education and I wanted to show something about the moon? I can now click on the moon. It's then got to load and whatever, but you get the point. So by doing this, suddenly I've got, and I'm just going to do stop share for now. That's really, 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 really handy to do. Little heads up for the wise, because we need to be. Turn off notifications. Can you imagine? You're doing your thing, you're like 1,000 people watching you or something. And I don't know, your friends texting you stuff that probably the world doesn't need to see. So just be a little bit aware of that. Turn off your notifications just for a moment, probably the whole time. But apart from that, yes. But apart from that, that is a hack to produce a second camera, because all of you have phones. Most of, I dare say you do. So have a little play. Don't try and do it for your first time in front of 30 people, but just go through, share screen. Oh, look at that, Karen. I see you look different now.
Thanks, Ben. Yep, there we go. I can't actually see the corner of my screen anymore just because of the amount of other stuff that's in my room. But as Ben was asking me to demonstrate, it took me a little while to work it out, was because I've now got that light. And now it's really overcast, so it's actually not particularly bright. But all of a sudden, the front of me is really dark because all of the light's coming from the side and behind me. And I couldn't tell you how many times I've been in a presentation when someone's sitting in front of a window. It may be lovely sometimes when they're looking out of that window, but when they're presenting with that behind. So it's just a really quick way to demonstrate that you do need, sometimes being in a really dark space with no windows can actually be better when you can have the auto lighting correct than actually being in a place that's got lots of windows. So yeah, a quick example of one, you don't need to do a lot to create that space. Remember, let's see how quick I can be with this one. Oh, the camera was faster than my wheelie chair. But you can see the difference there. All of a sudden, I'm back in light. I've got control over my backdrop, and at any time, I can change that. So tomorrow I might have a session on, Sydney's marine life. I might have, completely different things up there behind me. I could be doing one of my what's in your backyard, and I could have a whole bunch of insects there. So it's a really simple way if you do a variety of programs, or to have consistency. If you're doing, say, a series of programs, you may want to have the same color top, the same things behind you, so you can get that continuity again. So it's quite different types of things that you can do.
Absolutely. So that was just like, I kind of put Karen on the spot there, but I knew full well what it was going to look like. And as presenters, we can talk underwater as needed. Now, just thinking about environment of your space, honestly, what Karen alluded to is true. The smaller places actually usually do better. I want to think about when you go into a school hall just before some school presentation. The reason why I say it is, a lot of us will have had kids or at least experiences at some point. They're big, they're hard floors, hard ceilings, hard walls, and they're echoey. Now imagine what that does to your microphone. Now take that another step. What if you're trying to present a formal business presentation from your office, but everything in your place is just, I know, hopefully it's not austere, but it could be, maybe you're trying to present from a boardroom and it's just frankly the surfaces are too hard. Honestly, soften them up as best you can, soften them up. And from your home, and I have actually done this because I had to, we all went through COVID, right? A real quick way to soften your sound is don't put the washing away. Literally say, I'm not putting the washing away. Keep your washing on your clothes racks, keep them behind the camera, because think about what they actually are. You've got these lines of shirts and trousers and stuff. They are channels of soft things. And guess what? Sound gets trapped in channels of soft things. And the more soft things you got around, the better. Right? No, I think it works.
Yeah, we hung blankets up. So mostly because for early morning sessions as well, it stopped the sound going up my stairwell, waking up the rest of the family. But also it meant that the previous room that I was using that didn't have any curtains, I had less hard surfaces. So yeah, absolutely. And again, it is about practicing. We're going to say it over and over. Thinking about the audience for that particular session, where you're going to be doing it, whether it is inside or outside, whether it's a big space or small space. And then if it is a big space, how you can soften it, or whether or not that, you're not using a distant microphone. So Ben showed microphones before. So the one I use is actually a desk mic. So it actually sits in front of me. That would not be good if I had it on the floor and I was walking around, because it would be picking up all of the sound and the vibration. So having a think about not only what kind of mic you use, but the position that you put it can really help controlling those things. So it's all about controlling the elements, controlling your light, controlling your sound, and controlling your video, and those kinds of things. Excellent. So I think, are there any more sort of questions about sort of backdrops and rooms and those kinds of things? Because otherwise we're going to move on to different platforms.
I feel like we should always have thinking music. Because honestly, and so literally, you just this banter alone, think of it as a presenter, right? You know, like when you're presenting to like an audience of 100 people live, you're on stage, you're doing your thing, and then you ask questions and no one stands up, no one puts their hand up, standard affairs. You usually, it is far worse in digital land by a long way. I mean, if we just were any questions and just sort of waited, it'd be tough.
It's lucky that Ben and I can always fill any empty air. So in terms of which platform and things to use, again, it all goes back to what your audience is. So today we are in a webinar. So we're using Zoom. Ben and I have been using Zoom for quite some time, and we like it, especially when Ben goes into sort of some of the security and protection protocols that are in place. It's lots of the other platforms are catching up. So there really is a big variety. So I won't necessarily use it as Zoom, but more of that digital platform. So you've got sort of your meeting, which is camera, audio on, engagement. You need to choose when to do that and when not to do it. So today we're doing the training in a webinar format, just because it's unknown about numbers, and also people coming from lots of different places. There's a security reason to have webinars in place as well. The reason why webinars still can be really engaging, you've still got the chat as you've all been using really well. We've got Q&A, you can do polls, and Ben will talk a little bit more later about how you can bring in other apps into, say, a webinar as well. So don't think that you can't have an engaging exchange with your audience if you're in a webinar format. They can be done extraordinarily well. Hopefully today is an example of that, but they can be really boring as well. And I'm sure all of us have sat in a Zoom webinar that someone's sharing a PowerPoint and is talking for 2 hours. Now, if it's a topic you are absolutely fascinated in, you'll still love it. But if it's something that you're struggling a bit with, or you're a bit tired, it can be really hard to stay engaged for that entire time. So think about the length of time your program is running for, your audience, the age of your audience. Should you run it as a short series, 3 half-hour episodes as opposed to 1 hour and a half? Is that a way to keep that engagement if you're using a webinar for large numbers? The meeting format is great, cameras on, live engagement, but again, with adults, it's often they're not going to have their cameras on, and they're not necessarily going to speak or engage anyway. So you could have maybe just done a webinar anyway. So have a little think about the age of your audience and what you're trying to get across. If you're doing a really small, pre-registered, intimate discussion with 10 people, a meeting's probably an absolutely great way to have that face-to-face engagement. For those of you that are doing sort of the exercise ones, you may be needing to see a position that the person's in, or something to actually correct something, or to know that people are doing it right. So again, you'd want to use a meeting. But oh yeah, Ben, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was going to add to that. So I mean, a real quick way. I mean, save this link. There are others around. There's another one called Kahoot. So I've just put in AHA slides. What that is an ability to start interacting with people en masse. And so what you then do is you then throw up a QR code for everyone to scan, and thank God everyone knows what QR codes are now. Kind of handy. Also, you can then put the web link saying, come join this game. And suddenly now on their phones or on their desktop device, off they go. It's a little bit more cumbersome if they're coming in on an iPad, because you've got to bounce between the different apps. Same with an Android device. There's sort of no choice on that. But it can produce another element of interactivity for sure.
That's absolutely right. And you can use any of those things as well if you're doing it directly as a live stream. So another option is to use things like Facebook Live or YouTube Live and do it as a live stream. So you're not necessarily getting, and I would suggest if you are doing that to take the chat off, because it definitely opens up to anyone saying anything. Whereas you can do a live stream and have something like Kahoot still operating within it, so you can still have engagement, but there's a little bit more control over that. So it's definitely worthwhile. And one of the other things that Ben and I suggest quite a lot is to record what you're doing. So you can then use that event, program, or session, whether it's a one-off or a series, as a piece of digital collateral. And what that means is, if you don't want to have it out there for anyone to do because you want them to come and do, say, a paid program, then you can still edit it down. And there's some pretty simple editing software that Ben is going to throw up there. I'm sure he will. YouTube now does some basic editing, has a basic editor in there as well, so you can top and tail it, but you can trim those sessions. So you may just have 5-minute bits, and then you can use those as teasers to encourage people to maybe come into a full program. So just think you're delivering a program. Even if you don't use the recordings in the future, having it recorded means that you've got the option to use that for later on. And I've been finding that really valuable in my own business, that I can edit different things down into shorter pieces of collateral that I can use on my website as promotions, or just to encourage traffic for particular events that are coming up as well. So that's a really useful side of it as well. So again, really harping back to knowing your audience will know which platform that you want to use. Do you want to have that smaller group, camera on, audio on engagement, a bigger event, and have just sort of the digital, typing, Q&A and apps being used, or live stream? So they're the kinds of things that you need to think about before your event in terms of your planning as well. And one of the things that we'll just touch on is, what are you plugged in to your hardwire internet? So ideas of using Wi-Fi, we tend to suggest that you try to be plugged into a network cable, the blue cable plugged into the back of your laptop or computer. Now, in saying that, I've had some really dodgy internet the last couple of weeks, so I knew this was important. So I actually have a separate 5G box that I'm actually Wi-Fi'd to at the moment, because I thought that was going to give me more stable internet for this session.
Totally. So, and actually having a backup as a hotspot for your phone and knowing how to go to that fast is critical. I've been there before. There is an Achilles heel with all this, and honestly, I wear two hats, not just Virtual Excursions Australia, I run physics education as well. We were running a presentation. We had I don't know, maybe 300 students connected about a month ago to a thing, and we had a blackout on a desktop computer. Now, because it was a significant session, we had a moderator who simply just jumped on and said, well, I guess there's technical difficulties, and talked their way through it while I rapidly texted, this is what I've got to do. Laptops actually have that advantage because they've got a battery. So if you've got an actual mission critical gig that you've got to do, desktops they really do have an Achilles heel, which is not talked about much, but I saw it.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Having your phone as a backup and as a hotspot. Yeah, so at the moment I've got 3 options. So I've got my phone as a hotspot, I've got my network cable plugged in, and today, just to avoid that, I've actually got a separate portable hotspot that I'm using. And again, it is all about practice and being comfortable enough that when something goes wrong, you can solve that problem. And absolutely, most people, especially in the last couple of years, have so much more experience, doing Zooms or Teams or Meets, that when something goes wrong, they're pretty comfortable with going, oh, okay, yeah, I'll come back in 5 minutes, or, oh, I can't come back, but I'll look at the recording later. So, don't be afraid to say, oops, sorry, we've mucked up, or we've made a mistake or something, you know, we're just going to have to pause for a few minutes. You know, we've got a few of our anecdotes at the end that we'll finish up with when things go wrong, and they will. But we'll save those to the end.
Absolutely. So we'll do the pause and just see if you've got any questions, because we are just really just torrenting information out at you in some ways, throwing stuff out. I am robot talk. I am too. I will hotspot.
So as you can see, and we didn't plan that was, you know, purely the internet around us, and that will happen. And really, it is the audio. So we could, you know, forgive a little bit of jolty video, but as soon as the audio goes, you really notice it and you really pick it up. I've once had to deliver a session that I had video going through the connection, but I actually had to do the audio through a phone. So I had my phone on speaker, and the teacher at the other end had their phone. And you know what? It worked. We're a little bit out of sync, but as a backup, and that was a perfect example of double checking your equipment before you start. Someone had used the equipment in between my last session and had unplugged something that I wasn't expecting. Excellent. Ben's back. So yeah, even when things are running smoothly, you know, 10 out of 10 times, it is always worth just giving yourself that little bit, you know, even if it's only 15 minutes before your session, and it just gives you a bit of time to adapt or do anything with those, you know, accidental things that might come in, like audio or video or lighting.
Absolutely. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off this deliberately. So not for a shameless plug of the logo. What it really is for is audio carries very little data. Video does. So if you get a warning about bandwidth, turn your video off and keep talking. and when it's sorted out, return it back on again. It's actually an important thing to do. Now that didn't warn, it just simply just dropped at all. It's like, fine. But yeah, it's good to little hack to do.
Yeah, and just again, just tell your audience, be honest, saying, hey, it looks like I've got some bandwidth issues. I'm just going to turn my camera off, and I'll keep talking. And as soon as that's come back, we'll continue on. Usually that's a great opportunity to say, hey, are there questions out there? You know, can I answer some of your questions while we're sorting that out? So it's yeah, it's inevitable with digital technologies that something will go wrong, and being confident. And again, going back to that practicing, you will be able to adapt to that a lot easily. Yes,
so I'm going to change it up in terms of how we're presenting, because we were kind of like going, we're just going to talk. I'm going to ask you a question, because I know you'll know stuff. So, you know how we often want to share a video. Now, I want you all to think about when you've been watching videos and someone presenting, and then share a video when stuff goes wrong. So my question to you at this point, Karen, is what are some problems that happen when someone wants to share a video and they're just asking for trouble?
Yeah, so lots of people love sharing videos during sessions. Now, I never share videos during sessions. So there's a couple of things. One, if the video's got audio, most people don't share the audio sound. So sometimes it might just be bouncing off in the room and picking up on their own mic, or there's no audio coming through at all. So it's just a video. Another option is, if you really do want to do it, drop the rate, the frame rate down. So lots of people will try to share a video at 1080, which is really quite high resolution. It is a bandwidth sucker. So it is not going to show very well. If you can drop that down by half, or if not more, even though it's more pixelated, it will actually come across far better than if you were showing it at really high resolution. What we tend to do is suggest share that as either pre or post collateral to your audience. So where it's always great to do a follow-up. And for those of you that were with us last week in the marketing lunch session, it really resonated with me. Follow up with your audience, follow up with your marketing. Actually having pieces of information, and especially videos that you can share afterwards, is a great way to keep them coming back to you and coming back to your content. So if you can get away with it, don't share a video. Now, another one that I've seen work quite well is actually sort of animations, because you don't expect them to look as good as live footage, and things that are captioned instead of having audio. So I've seen that work okay, but again, dropping down that bandwidth. Ben, how are your examples with videos?
Sure. One way is you have a choice, literally, as to where the source of the video comes from. So you could have a video coming from your computer, or it could be the same video on YouTube or Vimeo. Now, I'm going to actually throw you all guys on the spot. I'm going to actually ask you the question in the chat. What do you reckon? Is it better to share from a file stored on your computer during the session, or is it better to go to YouTube, press play on YouTube, and see what happens there? What do you reckon? Can't put you on the spot now, haven't I? There is actually an answer here. Oh, here we go. Share video. Oh, here we go. On YouTube better. Here we go. Don't embed video in PowerPoint. Say, yep, doesn't work. That's true. I like that, Craig. Now, by the way, a little heads up, Craig and the team from Reef HQ up in North Queensland really know video conferencing very, very well. So what he says, I agree with. It's true. All right, what else we got here? So you find YouTube better. Okay, cool. So it all depends on, in some ways, if it's the internet. Going from a cloud storage can or cannot work depending on, frankly, you're pulling it from the cloud, you're throwing it to your computer, and then you're shoving it back up to the world. So it can cause some dramas. I haven't found YouTube too bad, but I have been caught out before. If you go to YouTube, the disadvantage is if you're working with another staff member or something, delete the ads. Get rid of the ads first, and be really aware of the next video coming, especially when it's not your video that you're in control of. That's where that can go. Stop. Craig and I know each other. There's Karen as well. All right, so yeah, so that's to be aware of that. If you can use your own video on your own device, you avoid the drama, and you got to key it up. And so those are the main things there. But I think what Karen said about sharing the sound, that's killer. A lot of times I see people press play and happily watch it. I watched a whole, because we're in Australia, a whole Welcome to Country once where there was no audio and just vision of the bush. It wasn't it.
Which is still quite lovely. Now, I have to say, one of the acknowledgement of countries I use for school students has audio and it's captioned, because every now and again it just doesn't play nicely, doesn't like to go full screen, and you can't get back out of it. And you'll find that lots of people will actually use two screens when they present as well, so they can have spread their things out to what they're share screening. So sometimes it can be a little bit challenging there as well. Now, Ben, just before we move on to sort of some of the presentation techniques, did you want to just talk about some of the security that's important,
Sure,
regardless of your audience?
Got it, regardless of your audience. So we took a slight risk because we figured there's not that many people in this, and we could kind of see the URLs. Went, you know what, we'll be good here. You can't always do that. So as a whole, what I would often do is turn off chat. Right now, you guys can chat, and so we can kind of be a bit more interactive. But in reality, it's sort of asking for trouble, because when you do it, you can't delete it. Anyone can write anything, and suddenly it's can be a real drama. So if you're presenting in a webinar, you turn off chat. It's nice to have the chat for hosts and panelists only, so you can have like a back channel, which is actually important because it'd be like, hey, Karen, you're up next. Are you going to talk about sound? Could have been a thing I could have typed. Or if we had a moderator that do that, Ben, you're talking over for too much, or there's too much time going on. That's a handy chat. But imagine if you got 100, 200, 300, 400 people in chat, it's borderline impossible to follow that thread. And there can be all sorts of stuff. And behind that, other things that can come up too is that if you will have in security settings, it doesn't matter, it's not about Zoom, it could be other things. Can they upload a file? Can they share their screen, especially in a meeting, right? So a lot of times we share screens. It's good, but what if a person who jumped into your meeting was, for one of the better term, malignant, and now they share a screen of bad stuff? And unfortunately, a lot of the stuff that happened during the initial lockdowns and whatnot was entirely predictable. The entire distance learning community knew what was going to happen, and there was nothing we can do about it. We're literally watching a train wreck happen. So if your users can somehow communicate to your other users, every one of those types of communications are an opportunity for feedback. So they can be file, they can be vision, they can be sound, they can be text. So just think about whatever platform you're using, what are your controls in place? And I'm still amazed to this day, because it happens a lot, people are still sharing links publicly that aren't password protected, which is kind of like, why? Because you literally just could password protect it, and now it's a little bit more encrypted. It's a good idea. Now, just say something does go down. I mean, assuming that you haven't got it in the text side, just so they're writing stuff in the Q&A or whatever, you can eventually just report and chuck them out, right? That's easily done. And it's very worth saving the chat in case you need that for other reasons. But my best advice on all of this is don't set yourself up in the first place. Now, that's a general chat. Then there's the other side. Just like a lot of people have been presenting a lot, especially in public spaces. Now, there's some rules around the legalities of this. And now I'm not a lawyer, so you might need to speak to a lawyer eventually to get this exactly right. But just be aware that if you are grabbing someone, they actually know that they're being broadcast. They just think you're going to interview them or something. That they are being broadcasted to a whole bunch of people. And if you're recording as well, are they happy with their face being recorded in the first place? And more importantly, if you really go down the line of it, have you gained not just oral, yes, you can record me, but it's literally written down, a written permission slip saying, yes, you can record me for these purposes. And so that's a little bit cumbersome, I know, because it's not as free form and happy, but it can cause a lot of dramas about how their image is stored. There's all sorts of dramas and all of that. So just be aware of that. The main things. And then, Karen, is there anything else you'd like to add to this? But they're the ones that really crossed my mind really quickly. Thanks for
I think, again, I'm going to just keep repeating it. It's knowing your audience as well. So, there's a lot of things that you can do in terms of setting up your session that has, like today was registration. So we knew that we've got contact details for everyone. We're not sharing an open link. When we were doing our social media and our advertising, we also weren't just showing, an open Zoom link that anyone could come into. So having registration can be really useful. And there's a lot of data you capture with that as well. And it means that you can go back and connect with your audience later on. That can be really, really useful. If you, with a lot of the schools that I do, so I have for my meeting sessions, waiting room enabled. So I send a link to the teacher. Sometimes it could be, certainly when it was learning from home, those were big, a lot of people were on those links. So we would have waiting room enabled, and I would have the teacher checklist or the student list, just, so I could pretty much make sure that who was coming. Now, a great example of that was, adults like to change their names, kids like to change their names. So, they were changing their Zoom name at the bottom to things that were not necessarily inappropriate, but were silly. So that's another setting that you can do in the back of the platform you're using, is to not stop them doing that. So, you untick it saying, enabled to change names. You take off share screen. So there's those kinds of things that you can also do to help with that. So again, whatever platform that you're using, whether it's Zoom, Teams, Google Meets, or others, practice in your settings. Zoom certainly made it compulsory to have at least one security feature. So you either have to have a password, a waiting room enabled, or registration. You have to have at least one of those. Now, I'm not sure whether that's the same with some of the other platforms, but it is very much worth being aware of that. And it's to keep you safe as well as all the rest of your participants. You know, a great example was at the beginning of this year, I think, when they were doing the Novak Djokovic court case, that whatever platform that they were using was continually hacked. Someone shared screen, inappropriate stuff. It all had to get shut down because they didn't have their security measures in place. And this was sort of a government court. You would think that they would have been the first people to have a bit more security. So, you know, again, it's just one of those loopholes, and there are enough people out there that are looking for those loopholes. So,
absolutely. And actually, just one thing to throw in there, you know, when we as business people, because this is a business forum, we get excited about sharing our thing. Come join my thing. It's going to be a great thing. And of course, you either yourself or your social team then gets onto social media and starts sharing that link. Imagine sharing a non-password protected link without any sort of waiting room whatsoever. That is exactly how most of those, it's the right word, Zoom bombings and other bombings would come in, because the bots are literally looking for these unprotected links, and off you go. And that's real drama.
Yeah, and Craig's just mentioned up at Reef HQ that they use the chat and have it blocked so people can talk to panelists and hosts. Now, that's a great way to do it if people need to say things just to you. And so it means that not everyone is seeing that chat, that it's actually only going to the hosts and panelists. And it can be really great if there's like a help desk thing or just a general piece of information. That's really useful as well. So if you are using webinar format, you can have your chat on and just blocked to hosts and panelists. So you members of the public or your audience aren't necessarily seeing that. Excellent. Thank you for sharing that as well with us. So we've kind of covered quite a lot of our sort of engagement techniques as we've been going through as well. So we've talked about multi-cameras. Ben, do you want to add anything about using multi-cameras specifically for engagement?
If you can, do it. And the reason why is all of you have been watching a 2D surface, point and shoot that way, for, at this point, 1 hour and 12 minutes. So that's a long time. Have a think about, I don't care what you watch, go watch something tonight on TV. I double dare you to see a session that runs for 30 minutes with the same camera. Please think of it doesn't have to be over the top production, but try and do something. Now, definitely if you can hook in that phone as your second camera, if you haven't got another camera, it will make a huge difference. So right now I can see, if I just stop me going for now and I'll just do voice from the sky. So I'm talking over Karen's thing. There's a trilobite, and I can talk about the trilobite, and Karen can zoom in and point out the trilobite and look all the things. And now, Karen, can we look at what type of rock is that, etc. This just breaks it up a little bit. And Karen moving, there you go. So even me just doing that and then replacing my spotlight, boom, it's just a slight change, even though I have static camera completely from my end. It will help. But yeah, I mean, that's all really I think we can add to that, Karen. If you got them, use them.
Yeah, absolutely. As you know, before I had the frog there, there are some really simple ways that you can use a second camera or a different camera angle. Now, if you've only got a single camera, there's still things that you can do to make that sort of engaging as well. So don't worry if you don't have extra things. But as Ben said, pretty much if you've got a phone, you've got a second camera. But again, practicing to make sure that you've got your presets or you've got your camera angles sorted out is really worthwhile there as well. So we've talked about sort of sharing screens and things like that. A lot of my presentations that I run against imagery on a PowerPoint presentation. So I'm a little box talking in the corner to my PowerPoint. So I've usually got no text on it, lots of great images. A lot of the things are, spiders from my backyard or something, do you know what this is? And then the kids are putting in the chat, whether it's a cocoon or a egg sac or those kinds of things. So they're having engagement because they're answering to a question that I've provided linked to the imagery that I'm showing. I tend to not stay on a PowerPoint the whole time, so I will actually come out of that. And again, it's just changing that dynamic. If I just had a slideshow and just a talking head and I wasn't moving through the pictures very quickly, it does slow things down. So by making sure that the content's moving along, making sure that I'm going in between the PowerPoint presentation, the things I might have on the desk there, like zooming in, it is a different screenshot, and also myself, whether or not I'm also holding something, just keeps the momentum going, makes it dynamic. Now, as I've mentioned to before, I'm a bit of a storyteller. So I use my personal experiences to help engage my audience into the content that I'm talking about. And again, it links back to some of the sessions we talked about last week about knowing your audience and what you are trying to achieve with your online session and making it personal, having that personal connection. And I do that by, showing stuff, talking about things that happen directly to me, showing pictures of things that are in my backyard. And it creates that sort of nice, engaging exchange of information, even if it is in a webinar format and they're just typing things back to me going, oh, I've seen that too, or oh, I saw one of those when I was walking along the beach. So, those kinds of things can be really valuable about going beyond just the stuff that you've got in your room and your lighting and your audio, but creating that engaging online connections. So Ben, I'll throw to you about, the programs you run, about how you create those engaging online connections.
Oh, yeah, I can do that. Why not? In terms of programming, it comes down to however you feel your audience will respond. So we work from, and so far we have done preschool right up to retirement homes. And as a whole, the way we make it engaging for us, irrespective of the content, is we send them a thing to do. So it'll be a shopping list. We have these things on hand and follow us along. Now, if you are going to do that, don't expect everyone to remember it. Doesn't matter how many emails you send, they're not going to remember the thing in the first place. But some will. What can be really cool if you're doing a meeting format where you can actually see all your audience is go, hey, for example, like I'm going to pick on Mary because I know Mary. So Mary Bell, hey, you're doing a really cool thing with that plant. Show me your plant. And suddenly Mary's now running the session, right? Like she doesn't know it, and you got to pick your person. But if you can get audience interaction and get them to show off their stuff, kind of cool. I'll quickly go grab. Just for now, we'll grab a look at what physics gets up to for school programs. But I hope that sort of helps a little bit.
Yeah, so a lot of the things that Ben does is demonstrations and experiments that are exciting. That's what I was trying to get at, Ben.
Yeah, sorry, I'm there now. I actually, because I have got any experiments, but I'll give you an example of if I was going to use an app. I'm going to quickly just share screen for now because they might be kind of handy. And oh my god, I've got so many tabs. But so I'm going to go over here. So unprepared. But if I go over here, right. So as I talk, we now have this thing called an oscilloscope, and you can watch me talk away, talk. Now, I'm running off this right now. So if I've unplugged it, then I have audio coming out. But I've had actually kids shout at me from New York. I'm in Sydney, and the little wiggly line happens for them, and they're learning about sound. But also they also learned about how far I was because you could actually time how long between a clap and when you saw the wave move. This little side thing. Yes, doing experiments are fun. Just being aware though that if I was, I'm going to just drop my blur for now just because it might be good. So it's my barbecue. Just say I was showing you the barbecue. This is now the barbecue class. Now the barbecue class might be fine, but if you can't see me actually in the barbecue and doing things, it sort of becomes irrelevant. Ideally, I'd have a second camera in there and I'd have the other people doing the same thing. Think about no matter what content you're doing, whether you're an accountant, whatever it is, get them to do a thing, no matter what it is.
Absolutely. And if you are doing a longer session, have break times. I know both Ben and I, when we're working with kids, if it is a longer program, and even adults, when we've done other training sessions, it's been have a stretch time, have a break time, go get a cup of tea. So, don't be afraid if you are doing a longer session to actually incorporate some of those things. We've had people in training sessions going off to get 5 things and then, because we know that they're mostly things that they'll have lying around. So, okay, guys, you got 5-10 minutes. We're going to have a break. Stretch your legs, have a cup of tea, and come back with a pen, a piece of paper, and something else, and we're going to do this experiment. Don't be afraid to incorporate some of those things as well. As we both were kind of saying, change that dynamic as well. If you are doing really large sessions, think about having a moderator. Now, Ben and I have been bouncing off each other, following the chat and the Q&A, putting links in. We've kind of taken that role on ourselves. If you've got a really big session, you may want to consider having another person in the room with you, or not even in the room with you. One of our moderators that we work with quite a lot is in Victoria. When we have Jackie with us, who's another physics education staff member, she will be monitoring the chat, the Q&A, doing any of the tech support in the background, doing share screens, spotlighting, and those kinds of things in the background. And it can be really useful if you're doing a big session on your own to have someone helping you for those kinds of things. Or again, I'm going to say it, practice. Have a practice on your own or with a friend, getting them to send chats to you, or just going through chat, Q&A, changing your cameras, all of those kinds of things, putting yourself on and off spotlight. So maybe even coming in on 2 devices, so you can change the spotlight between those 2 devices. It is really, really useful. Over time, you'll get really comfortable, and you may be more than happy to run all of the tech as well. But if you do have a big session or something really significant, you may just want to get that extra support, and it means you can focus on just delivering your programs.
100%. And actually, if for your sign-up page on your website, you can consider, and this is free, so I'm trying to give you as much free stuff as possible. You can use a chatbot too. Now, chatbots obviously need to be reprogrammed, but imagine you had some big session where people keep on asking you, where's my link, where's my link, where's my link, where's my link? How many times do you want to write that before you want to lose your brain? So if you have a chatbot, flick it to them each time they write it, it's actually a good thing. And you just plug in some HTML code onto your site and suddenly, boom, it's there. Or you can have that same moderator, that same virtual assistant, as Mary said, in there, actually typing to them. And that can help. The biggest pain point is 5 minutes before you start. Always. I can't find the thing. It's nearly always what it is.
So one of the takeaways, because we are getting close to end of our time, when we've been talking about practice, is practice looking at the camera. Ben, as he said, maybe you can show up his camera with all the little eyeballs on it again. Sorry, on the spot again. The eyeballs there are so you look at it, to remind you to look at the camera. So I'm looking at the camera right down the line. I can't actually see myself because my camera's sitting above my screen. So I will often go like this. So getting used to being comfortable about where your eyes are, trying to avoid distractions. I had a puppy outside my doors chasing a very loud ball for the first 10 minutes of the session. So, being aware of those extraneous noises as well, when to, throw it over to someone else and have yourself on mute if there are extra noises, or just being, clear and going, hey, got lots of noise in the background at the moment, we're going to do A or B instead. So that being all of those practicing helps make you comfortable enough to be able to be flexible. So that's going to be the other one. Take practice. So know your audience, practice, and be flexible, because things will go wrong, won't they, Ben?
100%. And also, if you do have a little bit of cash, if you can have a second monitor, your life is so much better. So right now I'm on one thing, and I've when I do a share screen, I take over your screen, and I didn't want that, and you want to exit full screen so you can keep on working on stuff while I talk to you. Now, if you're the presenter, you really want to be able to be confident that what you're sharing is the actual thing you should be sharing. And so a good way is by having a second monitor, it's like spreading out your stuff on a desk to be able to find stuff. If you can do it, please do so. Now, there's a difference though. People put monitors side to side, or they'll put monitors on top of each other. If you put it in the middle, it'll be more lined with your eye than looking here, or if it's here and then you're trying to like, I'm going to share this over here, and now they're looking at the side of your face the whole time. So having two monitors and hopefully a little bit back means that as you're constantly watching what's going on, your eyes aren't moving that much, and it's all good. Now, finally, just because I'm just throwing little tidbits here, I'm going to move my eyes to the right spot. Done. 1/3. Keep your eyes at 1/3. Not down here, not over here somewhere. 1/3 this way, and right dead in thirds either side of your head. So it's called a rule of thirds.
I think one of the video links I put up in the beginning is the sort of the top 10 tips that include the rule of thirds as well. So it is about placing yourself in the frame, and depending on what you're doing. So if I was spending a lot of time with the volcano, remember your words, I might actually want to be off to the side a little bit, focusing on it, whereas the rest of the time I might need to be right in the middle. So those kinds of things are really worth testing out what's going to work best for you. You are going to have the most engaging session with your audience if you're happy and comfortable with what you're doing. So I would suggest slowly bring in more bits of technology. So start simple, and then build up when your confidence is there. Now, in saying that, pretty much the results of the first poll was that, most of you are confident to very confident. So, again, you're ready to add those extra things in, and it needs to value add. Don't use tech for the point of using tech. We've seen that many times, and it doesn't necessarily make a better presentation. It's like the same thing with sharing video. Only share video if it's going to really value add what you're doing, because otherwise they're here for you. So you're the person that's got the content that they want to hear from. So it is much better for you to be able to do that. If you can have, really live interactive experiences, share those.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. So we had some questions. The recording, where can they find it? Karen, what's the story with that?
Okay, so next week we'll be sending out a package of pretty much both of the lunchtime talks and the training video with a PDF of digital collateral. So that will be sent to everyone that's participated in any of the sessions during Small Business Month from us. So the 2 lunches and the training, you'll get the lot. So if you've missed out on the lunches that we've referred to a few times, you'll be able to watch those recordings as well, and you'll be able to see the recording. We'll also share some extra things that we've done before. Some of the links that we've already shared in the chat will also be included. It won't be too overwhelming. It'll just be really pretty much a summary of our top tips about creating, engaging, and maximizing your engagement online.
Awesome. And don't spend money until you have to.
Absolutely. So guys, we've got a few more minutes left while we're waiting for some final questions to come in. Ben, what's your top story of when things go wrong?
What do I do? All right. I mean, I've watched, so we've had schools up the coast. We've watched schools go down the coast as storms are coming down. That happens. I have had, 2 years ago, we had a internal flood. So we work in an industrial warehouse with a lot of people, and the rain, it somehow got through, and it was actually rain coming through the light, coming through. Then I was about to present. That was kind of a thing. How about you?
Oh, obviously floods are a common theme. I, in my previous life, was doing a presentation with a whole bunch of rural and regional schools. One session at 11, one session at 1. No one showed up for the 11 o'clock session. I'm like, what's going on? I contacted the 3 schools. One was struck by lightning, one had been evacuated, and another one had been flooded out. I'm like, oh my goodness. I contacted all of the 1 o'clock schools. What storm? So, they were just coincidentally all in the same part of the world for the first session, and a completely different part of Australia for the second session, and didn't have any problems at all. So, it is bizarre. We've had a flood in the server room at the organization I used to work with as well. Blackouts, time zones, certainly be aware for time zones. I now have a time zone converter pinned on my desktop because I can never work it out. And it's even time zones within Australia when daylight savings is changing. If you're pre-planning sessions as well, that may be months in advance, it's quite useful to have, is it not got, no one changes time, daylight savings at the same time. So North America and Australia, it's weeks apart. So you can have a session that's at the same time, really conveniently, that's 2 hours different by the end of by the time daylight savings
Oh,
changes.
totally. Especially absolutely recurring webinars are a bandit for that. They cause real dramas. Oh, we're going to at 12 p.m. all the time, and suddenly it doesn't work. And also, just be aware of this. We're going to do this on the 5th of the 6th, 22. Now, 5th of the 6th to me and you means 5th of June. To the US audience, it means the 6th of May. So just click on that link and goes into some issues that you may not be aware of.
And yeah, Mary's got a story there that something happened to their camera and it was presenting upside down. So, you know, with a separate document camera. So these things are all absolutely going to happen at some stage. The more sessions you do, be prepared, be flexible, and have a lot of fun. The more relaxing and fun that you're having, the more engaging your audience will find your program as well. So hopefully you've learned a few tips and tricks from us today. Ben and I always have a lot of fun delivering these sessions, and hopefully you've just got a few things that will help you move forward and just, you know, create those engaging experiences online. We really believe in the value of online education, and there's so many different ways that you can engage your audience. We will share our contact details in the follow-up material as well. If you want to know more, please feel free to let us know.
All the best, guys. Thanks for coming along.
Thanks so much for joining us. Bye-bye.